All right, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time and jumping online to join us today. We'll be talking today about Microsoft Teams, and we'll be making this a fairly demo-based webinar, making sure you guys can actually see what we're talking about and try and keep the slideware and the PowerPoint to a minimum. But really what we want to kind of drive through is how Teams helps enable productivity, and it helps teams really, and by teams I mean work teams, enable collaboration and pull all of the different components of Office 365 together. And today we'll be presented by ProServe IT and Change Connect, the two folks on the video that hopefully you can see. So just really quickly from an agenda perspective, we'll take you through a little bit of an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about Teams itself, including a demo. We'll go through some implementation and adoption best practices, and then settle on some next steps and questions and answers. If at any point in time, I know that we've got kind of a dedicated space there for questions and answers. If there are any questions as you come through here, please feel free to ask them into the GoToWebinar chat window, and we'll answer those in real time to make sure that we've got a little bit of a dialogue and so that you don't forget the questions. If the questions do pop up and it's something that we're going to get to, kind of naturally, then we'll probably just wait and we'll answer those in due time. So really quickly from an agenda perspective, so my name is Jamie McMahon. I'm a VP here with ProServe IT. I've been with the organization for quite some time, and I'm joined by Umar. And maybe Umar, if you can give yourself a really quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Umar Malik, and I am Director of Implementation Services at Change Connect. And I think we'll dive a little bit into what Change Connect is in a couple of slides. But we are excited to partner with ProServe on this webinar.
Awesome. So ProServe IT, and again, I'll make sure that we're not doing too much advertising, but effectively, why ProServe IT, or what is ProServe IT? So ProServe IT is a technology organization. We help companies adopt cutting-edge technology, and we do that via consulting services, via software development, via managed services. And effectively, when you work with us, we kind of follow three mantras. We enable just-in-time technology. So effectively, we want to make sure that you're, getting everything all the value you can from the services that you leverage as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that we're applying a security lens to everything that we do. With nowadays with the cloud and technology and all of these cyber incidences, it's very important that as we enable productivity, we do that with the mindset of security, so that we're not opening ourselves up to risk. And finally, ProServe IT is a full stack technology partner. And by that, I mean, we help people through change management services in partnership with Change Connect, professional services and consulting, project management, software development, and managed services. So I think that gives us, a broad range of helping, or ability to help customers, kind of go end to end, so to speak. And I won't spend too much time on this, but effectively, we're going to spend the majority of this webinar looking at Teams, but we do offer a number of other different services from the Microsoft stack that we support. And Umar.
Yeah, absolutely. So Change Connect, we're a boutique management consulting firm, and we focus solely on sales transformations and kind of some of the buckets that we play with in terms of sales training, sales recruitment, sales advisory, and even CRM implementation. Anything sales related, and again, we focus very much on change management. I'm very much so a temporary VP of sales, unlike a full-time VP of sales, as like Jamie, at many organizations, and helping them with technology implementations, as well as things that are really kind of all things sales.
Awesome. Okay, so Microsoft Teams, and again, sometimes we feel like the real power is in showing. And so, some of you may have heard or seen the Microsoft Teams logo pop up inside of your Office 365 environment. Some of you maybe heard it from colleagues and are wondering what it is and how to enable it. And so we felt that, really the best way to do that is to just dive right in and and have a look. So I'm just going to minimize my stuff here and pull up the actual client. So what you see here on the screen is Microsoft Teams. And so I'll give you a real quick orientation. So we've got a little bit of an activity feed, chat, Teams, meetings kind of going along the left window here. All of the different components that we're going to be talking about, we can navigate there on the left. And right now we're in the activity portion of this. And so this is really the way that I have this set up for my feed, just describing a number of the folks that have been calling me, and that I'm able to actually see and interact with messages that people leave, and actually play back some of those things. I won't actually play some of these things because these are actual my real voicemail from folks that are leaving me messages. But there you go.
Yeah, and wonderfully, it always blows me away how you have the text, and you can see what was actually said. So if you're 9 times out of 10, I'm kind of running around, and if I'm at a Starbucks or if I'm running around and I don't have my headset on, I can easily just kind of fly through my voicemail. It's super impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, really, it's also another way to provide some indexing. And so the way that we've got Teams configured, it does have integration into our telephony system. I will give a little bit of a demo when we get down to the calls component of this a bit later. But because of integration, anytime people do leave a voicemail, it does do all of the transcribing into text. So not only do I have the ability to read the messages, I can also do a text-based search for the voicemails itself to try and find the content that I'm looking for, which is actually quite helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I can jump to those messages from my mom and skip some of the other ones and get right to it.
So when we talk about Teams, sometimes the most important thing is to understand what Teams does and what it enables. It's actually funny here. We've got Stephanie on the line as well. That's kind of helping us kind of do all the coordination and the webinar management. But when we talk about Teams, sometimes it's helpful to understand what Teams isn't. And what Teams isn't is it's not email. I think a lot of people have found email has basically kind of taken over our world. And I think for the most part, it's been a negative in the sense, it's turned into a negative into how people have begun to use it. And, just receiving over 100 emails a day, which I think is fairly normal for many folks. It's just incredibly difficult to process that and manage that. There's just no way to be productive at that. All the statistics say that it takes about 2 minutes per email to process that. So if you're one of those folks that gets about 100 emails per day, that's 200 minutes a day where you're literally doing nothing but managing email. And I don't even mean responding or doing the things that you're supposed to be doing from an action item from the email, but you're really just managing the email. So what Teams allows us to do is to get into and separate kind of that point in time communication, which I think is really what email does well. It allows us to send email or send communication messages that have a timestamp that might not be requiring immediate activity or actions, and move some of that instant or synchronous communication over to Teams. And previously this would have been functionality that would have sat within Skype. But it allows us to have kind of that rich dialogue with people just in time. So rather than heading over to Stephanie's desk and saying, "Hey, Steph, can you have a look at this?" Or in this instance, as we're going through this webinar, can I just check and see what's actually on the screen, make sure that people can actually see what we're presenting? We can do this back and forth, via an instant message. And obviously this is all live as well. And so you're going to see here on the left, I've got a number of my contacts. So I've kind of categorized a number of my folks that I work with here at ProServe IT, kind of the most frequent ones. So these are, in my instance, a lot of the folks that are tied into the sales organization here at ProServe IT that I communicate with frequently. I kind of create, quick messages or favorites, if you will, for the contacts. but it also allows me to communicate with folks outside of my organization. And actually, maybe Jeff and Pete don't want to have that out there, but for those folks that Microsoft or any other company that we interface with, I can actually create contacts and communicate back and forth via Teams as a platform with those folks as well.
Yeah. And I can attest to the fact that just having that, I think we'll probably talk about this multiple times throughout, that single source of truth, everything sitting in the same spot. I mean, right now, as I imagine, Jamie, you're having right now, that when you kind of stepped away from your phone and you can't reach for it, I can feel it buzzing in my pocket, and that is, I can't even describe how many number of communication tools I have to govern as I'm on multiple client sites, and there's different technology being used, and it is absolutely difficult to kind of keep tracks. But internally, if we're all on Teams, at least I can keep my Change Connect life nicely organized in one spot, and easy to get to.
Yeah, and I will show you what this looks like from a mobile perspective, because I think that's the other part that's really important here, where we talk about this. And obviously, I'm showing this from my PC and from my desktop, which I think, while most of us are at the office, that's probably the primary productivity tool, at least it is at this point in time, for most folks. But I know that working patterns are changing, and how people engage and how people are being productive is changing, and you need sometimes to while you duck out of work early to get to a Timmy soccer practice or something like that, and you need to be able to communicate and engage with the same type of functionality you have at your from your workstation to have on your mobile device. So it will kind of give you a sense for what that looks like, and kind of show the same type of user experience there as well.
It used to be okay to be at Timmy's soccer practice and have but have a version of your desktop life. And I don't, and again, in my world, it's not acceptable, in that if I need to create documents, organize, collaborate, build things, if I am not at a desk, frankly, that's not good enough for my clients. I need to have that full ability. And again, as we walk through, we'll see that you do have that.
Awesome.
Jamie, we just have a question here from Catherine. Does this have to be connected in a way with your office landline?
So that's a great question, Catherine, and actually thanks, Stephanie, for jumping in there. The landline question, there's a couple of ways we can do it. So you can actually do it in such a way where Teams takes over your telephony system and you no longer have a traditional landline, so to speak, or we can do this in such a way as to have it augment your traditional landline. So you kind of have both options. Here at ProServe IT, we actually have no landlines. Our phone system for our entire business is 100% driven through Teams. So for us, Teams is our de facto phone system. Perfect. And thanks, Steph, again for jumping in about the questions. So I'm going to jump to the next section here. Actually, while we're here on the messaging, it's funny, I just inadvertently popped this up, but here you'll notice that I hovered my mouse over Bill, who's one of the colleagues that we work with, and I can kind of get a quick glance at who Bill is, what his availability is. He was last online about 2 hours ago, so feels like it was a nice, good long lunch, Bill. And Bill is a solution architect. His phone number is email. And I have a number of opportunities here to collaborate with him straight from this kind of pop-up panel. And this will be a similar experience that you'll see across all of your Office 365 applications. So from within Outlook, from within SharePoint, and any application at all that you can see someone's that little red icon there with someone's photo, you're able to hover your mouse, wow, that's a mouthful, hover your mouse over it and chat, email, do a video call, a audio call, or even see what their organization structure is, so who they report to and their managers and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's always obviously super helpful in the organizations that you're working in. If they're fairly large, sometimes just people always talk about how they're great with faces and not names. I'm terrible with both, so it helps to have that. And what I also really love about that ability is that it looks the same in a lot of different places in teams. So it's easy to the learning curve isn't exactly steep. You can very quickly figure out who someone is, and like you said, what part of the organization they exist in, and also that it's very helpful to see when was the last time they were online.
Perfect. So I'm going to move to the kind of the heart of teams, so to speak. And for the purpose of this demo, we're going to sit here inside of the sales team, because I know that both Umar and myself, kind of this is the world we live in for the most part. But I want you to notice there on the left that we've got a couple of different buckets created here. And I want you to think of teams as not traditional teams in the sense where, let's say Steph sits in the marketing team, or I sit on the sales team, or Umar sits on the change management team. What we're finding more and more nowadays is that when people work, they no longer work within their functional work areas. You don't just work with the marketing team to actually do marketing tasks, for example. You need to work with a broader team. Maybe it's someone from operations and someone from finance and someone from, out in customer service to give you that feedback. And those are the types of teams that, actually make us productive. And on the left here, what we can do is we can create teams and basically a space for those folks to collaborate and to be productive and do the things that we need to do, as we sit inside of these teams. And so, this is a number of the teams that kind of run my life or my work life, so to speak. So I've got some of my one-on-ones that I host with some of the folks that sit on the team, and then a couple of other teams that I'm a part of. And what we're going to spend most of today talking about is actually the sales team. So if we look at the sales team over here, we have a number of buckets. So we have conversations, files, a wiki, videos, team meetings, Power BI, and product launch. And I'll kind of take you through each of these. And this is just how I've kind of created this sales team, because we do have the ability to kind of customize this and make this relevant to the specific team that you sit on. But through this conversation, I have the ability to create that same type of the instant messaging that I had up here in the chat with, for instance, when I was chatting back and forth with Stephanie. I can now have that same type of experience, except it's done via a group perspective, and it's persistent. So think of this as an amazing way for us to communicate back and forth as a team, and for all of the members of the team to see what's going on. And then, because this is persistent, any new members that come onto the team, so you see here that Robert Grilly has added Eric Sugar to this team January 25th. So Eric, after he's joined this team, now has the ability to go backwards and check out all of the different activities that have happened in this team over the course of time. And it's really just a great way to orient themselves to, kind of what's going on.
And Jamie, you used the word persistent, which is incredibly useful, and in terms of on the consulting side is incredibly important. But also it's transparent. You have that collaboration, and to your point, whether someone's onboarding and being added to the team, or whether someone had to go back, and the he said, she said's are not really an issue anymore, because everyone's typing out every word that they're saying, so you can very easily go back and take a look in terms of what was said on a particular date for whatever topic.
Perfect. So actually, I just noticed here, and Steph, you're probably going to stop me with a couple more questions that I've seen have come through. Okay, so I think we answered the landline question. Okay, there's a question around Slack and Teams integration. So there's no native integration. I'm going to talk about ways to do a little bit of that, because I think that from a use case perspective, Slack and Teams do kind of sit in a fairly similar bucket. They do both offer ways to collaborate and communicate as a team, although I think Slack is primarily a messaging tool, whereas Teams is also a messaging tool. But I think kind of the primary use case for Teams is a little bit different than Slack. And I think we answered the question around Teams and telephony. So there's a question: does Teams telephony have capability of call routing? And so yes, it does. And finally, there's a question: is Teams taking over Skype? And the answer to that is yes. That eventually that all of the functionality that sits in Skype is going to be moved over to Teams, and Skype, will become end of life and basically sunset as a product. From a commercial perspective, there will be the consumer version of Skype, but from a commercial perspective, we'll be leveraging Teams for the same functionality. Okay, so we talked about the conversations that sit here as a good way to have persistent conversation amongst the teams. The other thing that we find, and I don't know about everyone on the line here, is for the most part, when we work in teams, we work and we collaborate on content, right? And what that usually means is documents. And so what we have here is a very familiar view, I think, to probably everyone around how they navigate and look at files. And really what this is actually, this is a SharePoint site that's been exposed through Teams, but allows us to still have that similar file browser look and feel, except there's a little bit different here. So this is actually the co-hosted Teams webinar, the PowerPoint deck that we used to present a little bit earlier. And I can see right off the bat that it's a PowerPoint file. I have the name of the file, when it was last modified, whom I actually modified. So again, Stephanie, I can hover my mouse. I'm going to keep doing that apparently. I can hover my mouse over her name and see that same type of information, the file, and I've got a number of other options here to actually interact with and engage with the file itself. And this deck itself, you can see here, and this is actually the one that was last saved at 156, which should mirror the version that sits here. But what we're going to go to actually is, I think probably what most folks do is they sit inside of Word documents or spreadsheets. Actually, probably one of those others. So I'm just going to go into this and open up a Word doc that sits in Teams. Oh, I actually think I had this open already. And I've just popped up this doc, and you're going to notice a couple of things here that are different, that are very subtle. So this should be a very familiar view to probably everyone on the phone here. Maybe my ribbon looks a little bit different just based on my preferences of Word, of the version of Word that I'm using. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about a Word client, Microsoft Word client that I'm using to edit documents. You will see on the top left here that autosave is turned on. So this, now as I'm making edits to this, it does have the ability to, make sure that I don't put any risk of myself of my machine crashing. If my machine crashes, I won't lose any content, right? And that's a great feature because, again, this document does sit in the cloud. You can see it saving up here at the top, and I won't have any risk of losing any content. But where this is, sorry, go for it, Umar.
Sorry, gone are the days of constantly hitting Control S to make sure that you didn't lose any of your edits. I didn't realize how much of a nervous twitch that had become until I started using cloud-based Microsoft Office.
Yeah, it's well, for those that had the hockey memorized as well for how to save, I can tell that you're probably a gamer. Most people that use hotkeys are gamers, I find.
Absolutely.
But the other part here that might be a little bit different in Word is you're going to see, so obviously this is myself, Jamie, it has me logged into this, and I can actually see that Stephanie is into this document editing this file at the same time that I am. I can go in and I can actually chat with each of the folks that are interfacing with this document itself. So we can create a Teams chat just like you saw before, except specific to this document. So kind of a collaboration for this document. Or I could actually just go over to Stephanie and obviously chat from there. But as I go into this, and Steph, maybe if you can just pick a spot to edit some content here. Again, I now have the ability to collaborate in real time, and we don't need to worry about sending a document back and forth. And Umar, I don't know how you guys have managed this in the past, and it's kind of one of the best anecdotes I think that I see people doing is, you know, they send documents back and forth, like document version 1, document version 2, document final version, right?
Absolutely. And then final version 2, final version 3.
Final version 3. And then you get to that final version in all capitals to really signify that this is the last version of the document for real. And Umar, if that document, you know, if I was the person to send you that document, right, and you go and you do something with that document, 3 weeks from now, if you need that document, you know, what would you do?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. It's absolutely a nightmare. It's the version becomes an issue. You don't know what you're doing, and especially when you're sending documents to clients, do you have the final version? You open up a deck, it's missing something, or what have you, and especially if you have a team that's kind of responsible for content, and then you're going on a client site, and you need to make sure you have the most updated deck. It's an absolute nightmare, and you know, having the ability to not worry about that at all, and also again, what I love, like I'll probably say this over and over again with the familiarity. I mean, who hasn't been using Word for forever? But now the ability to collaborate real time in a document with, and you know exactly who's in there. You can see where their cursor is. You see what they're doing, and chatting about the document, and being able to do that from my phone or what have you is incredibly powerful. It's and it feels like we just weren't able to do this level of collaboration even just a couple of years ago. Right now, just it's amazing what we can do with the power of the cloud.
Yeah, and so actually, I realize now as we're going through this that you folks probably can't tell that it wasn't me actually typing this, but I promise you that it wasn't. It was actually Steph typing into this live document as we were going, and you know.
Why don't you show your hands, and then Steph, if you can type something, that'd be great.
Yeah, we could do that, I guess. But so again, right, we've got a document that's in real time. Oh, there you go. That was definitely not me. This is Stephanie. And so there is you know, we're real time collaborating. So we do have a couple questions from the folks here. So Vanessa is asking, do the SharePoint content permissions copy over into Teams? So we've got a couple of options when we create teams. We can create teams from a SharePoint group or a team site for those that are familiar with SharePoint. But typically what I've seen for the most part is people create teams, and you know, basically the permissions that you have within teams are consistent with all of the components that sit inside of that team. So in this instance, we're navigating inside of the sales team, and so only the members of the sales team is able to access, you know, the contents of the team, as well as go to the affiliated SharePoint sites or any of the content that sits inside of the team. Only people that are members of it have the ability to see it, edit it, manipulate it, etc. Michael is asking, is there a way to associate an existing SharePoint site with a team? We have a group of people who already collaborate on a SharePoint site. It's a subset of a larger site, and I want to introduce teams to them. So yes, we certainly can. You know, you kind of get into is it, you know, which is the better situation? Would we rather create a brand new team, or would you rather, you know, kind of enable or augment the existing SharePoint site with Teams functionality? I think it typically depends on, you know, the use case that SharePoint site does. If it's strictly a document management repository, so really, you know, it's really just for sharing content, then certainly, you know, and elevating that to a team can be effective. If it does a number of other things like calendars and, you know, you've got apps and things like that, it's more of like an intranet portal, so to speak, versus a document site, then, you know, we may want to evaluate the use cases there to see, you know, it might make more sense to just create a new unique team with the same team members from a productivity perspective. All right. So just a couple of things really quickly as well, just in the interest of time. So I do have the ability to share. So when we're talking about this, what I love about sharing via Teams is, you know, we move away from that. Oh, of course we get a, oh, there we go. I thought the demo gods were against us. You know, that example before, I was a bit joking where I'd send Umar a document, right? And I asked Umar, you know, so what would you do in 3 weeks if you needed that content again? The answer I typically get is I'd come back and ask you for it. Even though I have the final version of that file, I probably don't trust that version I have is the real final version, that there weren't changes made to it and I'll ask for it again. which is just ridiculous use of email, really. And so what we have is the ability to share these documents with people inside of our organization. You can create some permissions to that. And I can go ahead and just say Stephanie, and I can go and what this will do is this will send her a link. So you can see up here, it's going to send her a link to this file so that it's no longer sending an attachment in email. It's just going to send a link straight to where this document sits. And then so that way I know that we're all leveraging the same content and we're really working off of a single source of truth, and that I don't need to worry about going back and forth about, sending me the most recent version. I have the link. It's always the most recent version, and I can just, basically continue to leverage that.
And do it all completely in real time, which is, as Stephanie has shown, is easy. It shows up instantly, and if we're out on sales calls or doing demos or doing a pitch or what have you, need some last minute changes, need someone on the team to make an edit. I can sit there while it's being done. We can collaborate like we're in the same room, which is super powerful, and I can't count how many times I've been saved by that functionality.
So Jordana just asked us, can you send links to people outside Can you send links to people outside organization? So yes, you can send people to outside of the organization with a couple things. So we can send. Actually, we've prevented this from a security perspective, but basically you can say that anyone with this link has the ability to edit or read this content. So we kind of disallow that by default. We can say that very specific people can edit this document, or people in your organization with the link. So there's a couple of different ways we can create the configuration, but let's say that I want to send this to john@doe.com. So I can go ahead and do that. And so in this instance, I've disabled that just because of how we have this team site permission set up, but I can enable a team site to allow folks outside of my organization to collaborate inside of that team and actually create a team site for them to work on. And I can actually probably even show you that when we get back to the Teams portal around what working in a team site that isn't your organization's team and what that looks like. But the quick answer is yes, you can send links to people outside the org and they can collaborate and work on it. And there's a question, can you control permissions within members in a team? For example, member 1 can view only, member 2 can edit. Yep, yeah, there's, actually, why don't I just show you real quick. So let's say inside of the sales team, I can click the 3 little dots here. I can add a member to this team. And let's say I'm going to add Sin. Right, so if I add Sin, I can, actually if I do this, I'm actually gonna add it, that's fine. But I can now have different permissions. I can create him as an owner or as a member, and each of these roles have different sets of permissions to the actual team itself. And then, however, permissions for the actual content is done at the content level or at the folder level. So if you want to eliminate folks from editing or creating things as read-only, you can do that from within the content itself. I think the final thing I'll just show here real quick, just again based on time, is that we do have version history. So yeah, there's no worry about going version 1, version 2, version 3. As we go through and make changes to this content, it does keep track of that, and I can actually open up previous versions of this file to compare them or even restore these legacy contents. And so as an example, this is the version 9 I can see up here at the top, and I can actually even compare the different versions side by side and see what differences exist in the 2 different versions. And I have the ability to even restore, one versus the other, which is actually quite powerful.
that compare feature when you're dealing with Excel. Just the other day, I'm dealing with sales finances and tracking metrics and just making sure that no one's gone in and manually adjusted something, or a number doesn't make any sense. What did we do last month? How did this look? And just being able to do that at the press of a button is a lot easier than just trying to manually either print sheets or tick and tie and do any of that. Have it all kind of laid out for me has been great.
Awesome. So I'm just going to move it along here and make sure that kind of get to all the things. So inside of the teams, we can create wikis. And so for us, there are quite a bunch of contents around how to do effective sales presentations or presentations in general. We've got some case studies that we're proud of as an organization. And so we just kind of create, an area for folks to come see that. Sales videos. So we also have the ability to host and kind of create like an internal corporate YouTube channel, if you want to call it that. And so in this instance, we've got a number of sales training video that we've done on Sales Navigator, as well as Bond CRM, that my team can now go in and actually view this training at any kind of date in the future. And it basically creates that kind of that persistent video.
Especially for folks that can't attend meetings or need to attend after the fact or anything along those lines, you can just go in and watch a video, and you know exactly where it is in terms of important discussions that were taking place.
Yep, exactly. So for the team meetings, again, this is a live one, so I'm just going to check and see what happens when I click on this content. It's always great demoing in a live environment. But, basically for our team, we actually have a OneNote that we use to, manage all of our team meetings, and so that people can, edit and update the agenda for these team meetings we have dynamically, and people can always contribute content that they feel is relevant. And, basically we can add that team OneNote here, and it's really just integrated in. As for example, if I want to go to marketing resources inside of our teams, or the event schedule for marketing, as an example. I swear this isn't a plug, but you'll be able to see the events that we've got running coming up, and this is all kind of done with a OneNote integration into Teams. Moving along, we've got Power BI. So Power BI is a data and analytics reporting tool. And so again, we can natively embed a lot of these, very powerful reports right into Teams itself. And, in this instance, what we're looking at here is, sales performance, sales leaderboard, win-loss analysis of real data around sales. Well, some of it's real, some of it's not, again, for demo purposes. But, we can see things like win counts and win rates and average deal sizes, et cetera. And each of these things are actually fairly dynamic. So if I go to the sales leaderboard as an example, I can say, hey, let's look at, just doctor's offices, for example, right? It'll change the data and the lists that pop up here based on the information that is displayed.
Yeah, this is definitely where I would start my days in terms of our sales meetings, all within Teams. Coming in here, checking out your KPIs, not manually creating spreadsheets and doing that. Although we could potentially do that also within Teams, but having Power BI do the number crunching for us and present it high level. If I'm speaking to management, really those dashboards are powerful, and I don't have to explain things. And again, it all looks pretty here, and it can kind of be consumed on the treadmill too.
Okay, perfect. I think actually I'm gonna skip the last one just in the from a time perspective, because there's something called Planner. I'm gonna jump straight to meetings. So as an example here, this is actually showing my calendar, because I'm actually honestly I'm actually off today, other than this meeting, and so we can see who's in this actual event, whether they've accepted or not. And if this was a Teams meeting, for example, versus a GoToWebinar, which is what we're using to host the actual webinar itself, I'd actually be able to click a join button straight from here to join the meeting itself. I can actually just show what that looks like. If I schedule a meeting for test, Teams meeting with Steph, and let's say it starts at 3, details, etc. If I schedule that, I can actually see that Steph is free at 3 o'clock, which is awesome. I can actually attach this meeting to a specific channel. So again, from a persistent perspective, these meetings itself actually will then become persistent, but I'm actually not going to do that in this instance, and it's going to be a team meeting. So if I schedule this, and I come down here to this actual Teams meeting, you're going to see here that I can chat with the participants ahead of time, or I can actually just join. If I click the join button, it actually joins me right into that meeting itself. So quite powerful from a meeting perspective, and I can do that straight from within. I can also book that meeting straight from within Outlook. Sorry, usually I close Outlook just because of pop-ups and stuff like that while doing the actual demo itself.
And Outlook integration is great. I can't even count how many clients I've kind of spoken to, and when we're talking about technology changes to their stack or whatever it is, Outlook. What do we have to get? Do we have to get rid of Outlook? Can I keep my Outlook? It's people, and I'll be honest, it's hard. It's kind of once you get into it, and now the way how great the functionality is, it's hard to lose, and you don't have to.
Yeah, so like for example, if I've got an email that I've received from Stephanie, let's say, for example, I can actually respond to this meeting, respond to this email with a meeting, right? Which then creates that meeting out of this with all of the different people that were on this meeting itself. And I can actually elevate that to a Teams meeting straight from here, which then creates a URL for people to click on to join the meeting straight from within Teams itself, or from within the actual email they receive, or with dial-in numbers, to dial in from a traditional landline. Okay, and then finally, really quickly, I do have the ability to phone people, obviously. So, I just showed, I keep using Steph as the example, but I can actually call Steph straight from here, or I can dial a regular number as required. If I don't, I joke about this. I don't know, Umar, how many phone numbers you remember nowadays versus, let's say 10 years ago.
I know my mom's landline. I do not know my mother's cell phone number.
Yeah.
Or anyone else, really. Yeah.
So so we can still dial if you remember phone numbers, or if you get a business card and you don't have a contact for folks. But typically, I know that for myself, I dial straight from contacts. So a couple of questions we have. Ari is asking, is the chat encrypted? And can the contacts and chats be migrated from Skype to Teams? So yes, the contacts can be migrated from Skype to Teams, and yes, it is encrypted. A comment from Doug saying, "I'm off today as well. Why do we do this?" I don't know. Actually, I'll be honest. I forgot that I'd booked this day off at the same time that I scheduled the webinar. So I'm taking responsibility. I kind of did that to myself. So I don't want to kind of ditch you guys just because I was off. Can you create a Teams meeting for a group of people outside of your organization, or do you use Outlook? Yep, so I could just as easily from that meeting invite folks that are not part of the organization to join the Teams meeting, and they'd have the ability to either click the link and join it via kind of a web add-on, or they could dial in from a phone line, and that's regardless of whether they sit inside of the organization or if they sit inside of a different company. Okay, the last thing I promised was to show you what this looks like from my mobile device. So while we're doing that, loading that component up, I'm actually going to pause, just check, see if there's any questions, or Umar, if there's anything that I missed talking about that we talked about previously.
I think we've gone through planner. I think in the interest of time, I think we can kind of step over for now, but I think we've gone through quite a bit here in a short amount of time. The power of teams, how easy it is to walk through and explain.
So I have up on the screen here my mobile device. Hopefully you guys can see that. I'm just going to jump into the Teams client real quick so you guys can see the Teams. And you're going to see on the bottom there, it looks exactly like my thick client, except instead of on the left, it's on the bottom. So activity, chat, Teams, meetings, calls. If I go over to chat, for example, you're going to see that chat I have with Stephanie, and I can jump into that chat with Stephanie, and all of the same conversations that we're having earlier sit inside my mobile device, and I can do all of the stuff from here. This is actually how I was chatting with Stephanie as the webinar was kicking off. I was doing it from my phone because I couldn't actually use my PC because I'm presenting from my PC. And then I can jump over to the Teams, go to the sales team, and I can jump to the files, go to the demo that we looked at, and you'll see there that Word document that we were looking at earlier, I can actually get to it straight from my phone, and this is actually my full phone, so I can type into this and edit from here, just as I would anywhere else. So, okay, so I think again, just for the purposes of time, that's all I'll show from the mobile device. But I guess you can say, take my word from it, that all of the stuff that you can do from the actual thick client, you can do from the mobile device as well. Okay, and so I know when we talk about this is a lot. We get this is a lot of change for how people work. It's bringing a lot of different tools together into one spot, which makes it difficult, I think, at times for people to adopt that. And I know, Umar, this is something that you kind of live and breathe on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's really helpful for people to understand how to go through change management and kind of work through adopting these types of tools.
For sure. I mean, we can, right there, it says it on the screen, focus on the people, not just the system. That absolutely says it all. We can get a little bit lost in the bells and whistles, and I think we've gone through some fantastic bells and whistles. But really, as your business interacts with customers or even your own team, there's dozens of different ways to do it. And it's key that these interactions are efficient or as effective and efficient as possible to help streamline your sales calls, your business meetings, all of your interactions, whether they be external or internal. And we've gone through Teams, and I think it's been now that we've done the walkthrough, pretty evident in terms of the ways that can be done, and also allowing you to kind of catalog and pay attention to a lot of insights gained from those conversations, from those meetings. And specifically for me, that's all towards helping me increase sales, whether it be for my own team and for the teams that we partner with. But today I'll kind of walk you through the 6 areas that help guide you towards successful implementation that, like the screen says, that focus on the people, not just the system. So if we were to jump to the next slide and focus again, as I was saying, on those 6 different areas. So specifically, if we'll start at the top with securing executive sponsorship, and that can mean any number of things, but specifically, any and all successful implementations start at the top. And strategic direction for management needs to be tied in together with an active involvement and that'll help your team embrace any system. So it's not a matter of just here, use this. It is a matter of let's discuss and let's see what your needs are, let's see what your pain points are, and have that pushed down from management, but specifically having the power to do so. And you have folks in charge that'll move things along. Moving on from there, we have people and process over technology, and that is absolutely one of the mantras that we speak to at Change Connect. And specifically, Teams has wonderful features, and like I said before, it's really easy to lose focus on whether people and processes are aligned. People and processes need to be prioritized over that technology. Aligning those 2 factors with any technology allows you to streamline processes. So those need to go hand in hand, and some thought has to kind of come into place. And all of that will go to realizing a much higher ROI, which is pretty, which will make you a lot more successful with your executive sponsors. Kind of going through that a little bit more. we'll talk about defining success. You have to know what success looks like for your business to achieve it. So it can be kind of an afterthought at times. You picked a tool and you kind of go from there, and then you start implementing, but you haven't necessarily made a definition of a clear goal and knowing why it is that you are implementing that system. And then figuring out what your value props are and defining them, documenting them. Then, like I said before, communicating that to your team, having that discussion. You have to know what success looks like in order for your business to achieve it. And the piece that kind of touches everywhere is communicate, communicate, communicate. You absolutely have to do exactly that. Clearly defined goals aren't helpful if they're not shared. And your managers are critical to this. Keeping your employees engaged and productive, and it's going to help your leaders manage change. And the absolute keys to that are giving them the tools to lead that change, understand that strategy, communicate that purpose, which we spoke to before, and translate them to ways that are relevant to each employee. It is absolutely going to fall into the what's in it for me, which I don't think is a bad thing. You need your folks to absolutely know what those benefits are. And when you have that buy-in and you have that communication, you know that it's going to help for that implementation. And I think I fall into the next one in terms of, and it being very important to me, is celebrating early wins. I'm not necessarily a fan of waiting till everything's done to start celebrating. These implementations or these projects can be long, difficult processes. And if we just kind of wait till the end, we're going to miss the journey, and we're also going to make it difficult to stay motivated to get to the end. So celebrating that win reminds you of why you started this in the first place. And I imagine if we were implementing Teams and we were coming from, I think we'd mentioned earlier, Slack and then emails and Word docs and those back and forths. Hey guys, keep in mind that your lives are going to be a lot easier and a lot more efficient. We're not going to worry about all that stuff. And once we implement a piece or we start using a particular team for just our sales meetings and Power BI and taking a look at what our KPIs are, and check it out, guys, look how easy this has become. We'll move on to the next phase. Employees that feel appreciated and know that their efforts are being noticed are more productive. So exactly that, you're doing these types of implementations, and folks that have been slaving away. And I know for a fact when you're getting close to those release dates, those extra hours start coming in, and just making sure that everyone is that's respected and people are lauded for their efforts, and show how close you are to an even greater goal. Because again, Rome wasn't built in a day, and I imagine implementing Teams is probably not a one-day exercise, depending on how large your organization is. I mentioned it before, but that identifying the what's in it for me factors, that top-down change to get people on board and authority only goes so far. And that bottom-up change is far more successful, and for obvious reasons, but it helps to show your team why it's in their interest to change, saves time, better productivity, and from a sales standpoint, absolutely better closing. And you have all of those to take into account. So kind of fairly quick synopsis in the interest of time to get through this, but it is these are the things you absolutely need to take into account, pay attention to, document, and make sure are outlined clearly before you start any sort of technology implementation or anything that requires change management.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen, just to kind of piggyback on what you've said there, is some of this technology is, I think going back 5 years or 10 years ago, a lot of this stuff would have been driven from IT, right? IT would have kind of said, okay, here's the tools that I think that Mr. non-IT user at a company that you should be using to do your job. Whereas I think what's happening now is it's the opposite, right? The business is coming back to IT saying, hey, I want to do this. I want to use this. I need to do this to do my job. And now IT is trying to figure out, okay, how do I, do this at the same time as, think about security, think about risk, think about some of these other things. So, kind of going through this change management process is certainly, we found it's important, right? And it will lead to success, and not treating this as like another, IT. And I don't mean that from a diminutive perspective, but more in the sense where, IT is now becoming partners inside of the business in terms of driving positive change versus, a negative impact to the business and say, oh, my email isn't working or something like that. No, we all want to bring positive change forward.
Absolutely, and to your point, I mean, the way that we worked 10 years ago versus even 5 years ago has changed so dramatically, and we need to keep up, and change is constant and needs to be managed properly.
Perfect. So what's next? So there's a couple of things that we can suggest for from a next step perspective. We do run Microsoft Teams workshops to help you understand, why Teams and what it can actually mean for you for your business from an outcome perspective. So it's kind of talking back to Umar's point around change management and saying, what would success look like, or what positive outcome are we looking to achieve by deploying Teams? And then actually looking at doing a small pilot for either productivity or voice deployment for your organization. So if this is something that you guys are interested in, you probably have the Teams software already if you are an Office 365 user. There are many of the SKUs that comes with Teams by default. So if you need some help to figure out if that's a good fit for your business or to actually give it a shot, give us a shout.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of giving us a shout, we are always fans of getting in touch with many people as we can. We love conversations. So having said that, we're offering a free sales efficiency assessment, and revenues, and is always going to be part of your 2019. But I think that's also probably going to be tied towards your sales efficiency, and that's where we come in. And we very much enjoy the conversation and the process to get a sense of where firms and where our partners kind of where they are benchmarked against best practices, and to give you a sense of maybe things that might not be reinventing the wheel, might just be kind of cleaning some certain things up, but it's amazing when you kind of pull a particular lever and work on that, how quickly you can kind of get to a fairly large increase in revenue. So feel free to reach out. Contact info is there, and wonderfully that promo code is going to be in effect for a little while now. So please feel free to reach out. Any or about anything that we've talked about today, I'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Perfect. So just a quick Q&A. I'm going to catch up on some questions that have kind of popped in since we've been talking here. Doug asked, what resources are available through a Teams meeting? Is there always a call-in number, screen sharing? So yes, to that, as long as you configure it. So we do have the ability to create conferencing. So the Teams is absolutely a replacement, or can be a replacement, for traditional conferencing solutions. So if you're using, let's say a traditional telco's dial-in conferencing solution, or if you're using WebEx or something else for that, this might be both a productive replacement for that, as well as a cost-effective replacement if because you're already paying for the majority of the cost of Teams. Again, if you're already using Office 365. So yes, you can share your desktop, you can get call-in numbers, and you can do screen sharing, all from Teams, and that's for folks both inside and outside of your organization. Perfect. So folks, if there are any questions that we did miss, we will follow up with you individually, make sure that we don't, leave you guys hanging, so to speak, and not have your questions answered. As Umar mentioned, we'd love to have a conversation and continue the dialogue to see whether, Teams is a good fit for your organization. And, please do take us up on our offers there. Umar has been quite generous with that, their assessment they're willing to engage with you on, and we'd be happy to talk with you about Teams for your organization. So with that, thank you for your time, and hopefully we see you at our next webinar, next event. Thank you so much.